Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. We are live, we're national, and let me give you the phone number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to invite you to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation today because we have a lot of interesting, I guess I would call them items, right? Items, topics, things we want to get through. And a lot of things that we're going to, ask of you, the American people, the callers. But I want to start with a couple of things. You got the folks in Canada, the Prime Minister over there in Canada. He has his, I'm going to call his britches. His britches are in a bunch over Trump's tariffs. And I get it. Listen, I totally get it. I know that a lot of people don't want to pay the retaliatory tariffs that Trump has proposed. And these aren't even the retaliatory ones, right? Those are going to be reciprocal, right? And that means Canada's 270% tariff on American dairy is going to be met by a 270% tariff. Wow. So they're really, I'm going to use the term wigging out because of the tariff on cars. And their new Prime Minister, Mr. Carney, weighed in on this. Listen to this.
Yesterday, in the latest salvo in his trade war, President Trump again imposed unjustified tariffs on our nation in violation of our existing trade agreements. This time, he targeted the auto industry and the more than 500,000 hardworking, dedicated Canadians that industry supports across our country. We will fight the U.S. tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada. We will protect our workers and our industries during this difficult period.
Now, that again is Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. And I want to be clear on this. I would love to sit here and say, oh, the Canadians are all messed up about this. But I think any country would be upset with it, right? While I think what they should do is say, you know what, we're going to play ball here. President Trump, you're right. We've been getting a free ride for a long time. The free ride express is over, and we're gonna have some free trade here. But they don't want to do that. And I understand it, right? Because everybody's looking out for themselves, right? When you see high tariffs on the United States from other countries, this is because they're already doing their country first, right? It's not America first, it's Canada first. They're doing Canada first when they're saying, look, if you want to sell milk in our country, you got to pay us 270% tariff on your milk that may be coming from, I don't know, Rochester, New York, or Buffalo, New York, or any of those New York cities that are, right across the border from Canada. And likewise throughout the Midwest, where there's, Canadian borders as well. And they're looking out for their farmers. And I'm not mad at them for doing that. I'm not mad at them for anything. I'm just saying, you know what? Don't be mad at us when we hit you with the same tariff. And in this case, they're looking at a much smaller tariff. Now, the other side of that coin is there's a whole lot of paper products that come from Canada. A whole lot of aluminum, that a fair amount of aluminum that comes from Canada. And these are things that are going to become a little bit more expensive before they become cheaper. All right, steel. President Trump announced a steel mill by Hyundai, the car maker. Why? Because they see the writing on the wall and they realize, if we're going to have to buy this stuff from other places, we might as well make it here because at the tariff rate, it makes more sense to make it here. And that is the plan, my friends. So that part is working. I get that part. But at the same time, there's always going to be somebody out there saying, but you don't understand. If we didn't do anything, the cost would be lower. You're right. But if we didn't do anything, we'd keep getting ripped off the way we've been getting ripped off, even if the cost is slightly lower. And that's the problem. You never really achieved this free trade. So you kind of have to stick with the process here to make sure you get it. Leaving good enough alone isn't an option. And this is why I think Trump is appropriate in doing this, despite Mr. Carney saying that these tariffs are inappropriate. I have to say, I think that is just the wrong thing to say. Let's see. What else did I want to talk about? There was another big story here that I wanted to get to. Yes. Elon Musk. Elon Musk was in the White House. Or, no, he was on a soundstage with Fox News. And he answered some questions about what's going on and how spending has been. And I got to tell you, this is a very, 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 very interesting clip, because this is the type of common sense that you would never, ever find from someone that works in government. This only comes from someone who's run their own business, who has that type of industrious thinking. And again, you don't have to be the owner of Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and PayPal, and all this other stuff that he's done. You don't have to be him. I know people who run smaller businesses and went into government and said, wow, this place sucks. This is run incredibly wrong. And you realize that the government runs the way it runs for the sake of government's sake, for the sake of how they do what they do, not for the sake of we the people. And anybody with a conscience, in my opinion, and again, I know I'll take heat for this, and I'm sorry, but I didn't enjoy my time working in government. I felt guilty. I always felt like, man, I feel like I'm ripping people off. And, there were days where I doubted that. And I was like, maybe I'm not getting ripped off. Maybe this is fair. And I was getting ripped off in the private sector when I was, paying my 20% of my health insurance while my employer paid 80%. And my 20% back then would cost $8,000 or $9,000 a year. And when I got into government, the government picked up the entire tab. Now, many will justify that as saying, look, everybody negotiates a different deal. That's part of the perks package here. When you work for the government, you get this. But the problem is, the government doesn't do anything. They don't make anything. How on earth can they start giving stuff away if they're not giving your stuff away? They don't operate as good stewards. It's almost like they operate as bad stewards. Like that's the baseline. We're going to spend a ton of money. So I want to play this real quick clip of Elon Musk. Check this out.
For example, like the simple survey that was literally 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey, cost you about $10,000. The government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey. Do you like the national park? And then there appeared to be no feedback loop for what would be done with that survey. So the survey would just go into nothing. It was like insane.
All right. Now listen, years ago I learned about this thing, and it's everywhere, but I learned about it here in New Jersey when I became a school board member. I was a founding member of a charter school, still am, and I can tell you that I learned about this thing called prevailing wage, and I was blown away. And I was like, so hold on a second, you mean to tell me that our mission here is to educate these kids, but if I want to build a building, I have to do it at this much higher rate than a rate that I could find from a different builder, because we have to pay this higher rate because that's what the government says we have to do. And I was blown away by this. You just, if it's a government project, you just have to pay them more. If I was building a building with classrooms for a private training center for myself, I can do it at, I don't know, a third less. This is wrong, and that's what Musk is talking about. He's saying here, and way better than a third, right? He's talking about spending $10,000 on a SurveyMonkey survey as opposed to $1 billion. But that makes all the sense in the world, because to get all that information in the government, you get 10 people doing the job of one, and you just make it really cumbersome. You make a lot of paperwork, filing things in triplicate, 77 reports. You create layers and layers of red tape So you say, well, no, because you can't just, it's not that simple. You've got to file a 6490, and once you do your 6490s, you got your annual, TX 3740s. And, once you get that done, that's got to go for approval. That could take up to 3 months. And, of course, anytime we need to buy new equipment, every time we run out of paper in the copier, well, we got to send out a request for proposal. And, obviously that's got to go through something that's a GSA approved. And you just create these arbitrary rules to make sure you're spending more money and more people are wetting their beak. And I love Doge. I love it more and more every day. And I'm so glad that we have this spokesman in Musk, that he's able to in relatively short sound bites, say, oh my, when I hear him say that, I hear him saying, can you believe how badly we're getting ripped off? That's how it translates to me, right? The incredulity in his voice. So we'll continue to talk about that interview, and about all the other stuff that's being uncovered with Doge. I also want to continue to talk about some of the residual fallout. All right, there's continued fallout on of course, Pete Hegseth and all of that. And there's some other stuff I want to get into, because apparently the military situation around the world hasn't really changed, but it has. So we're going to do that straight ahead. I want to talk about that. Then I want to talk about the border. And, of course, I want to get into a little bit on what's going on with masculinity around the world, because it seems like that is dissipating as well. So keep it locked right here, folks. Rich Valdez keeping you company, working the late shift till midnight, 1 a.m. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you've worked so hard in the industry, and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation, and I want you to hear real quick before we dive into this. The minority leader, the Democrat leader of the minority in Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, this was last night. He's just continuing to beat the drum that they want a scalp. And this is, of course, why they set out to do this, right? This is why this whole thing, in my opinion, was engineered. Not that it didn't happen, but that it's a hoax nonetheless, right? If somebody says, oh, my gosh, Rich Valdez just had coffee, we should fire this guy. Well, who said having coffee was that bad? But I'm being, over dramatic here, and I'm trivializing something, but I'm trying to make a point. And we're going to continue to delve into that point. But I want you to hear what Hakeem Jeffries said. Check this out.
We're in the middle of a fight right now as it relates to Pete Hegseth. He needs to resign or be fired by Donald Trump. We've made that clear across the caucus. And Democrats, I think, showed fight in the Senate hearing on Tuesday and in the House hearing on Wednesday. Our veterans have stood up to push back against this stunning national security breach. That's a fight that we're in right now. Are we on the sidelines? Have we been silent about this scandal?
Are we going to be silent about the scandal? Well, yesterday I made some pretty bold assertions about this. I said, look, I know this thing happened, but I can't help but think there's so many similarities. I mean, not similarities, coincidences, right? Not the least of which is this Goldberg guy, being from the biggest rag out there. Then there's this reporting from Paul Alexander and from Paul Sperry, and it brings a lot of information that needs to be sorted through. I always, put my tinfoil hat on and think, somebody's doing spy work here. This is a setup. It's a fake, phony fraud. And of course, we have lots of questions and lots of answers that need to be heard yet. So I want to bring in our guest. He's a former spy himself. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's president of Project Sentinel. He also served as the National Security Advisor on Trump 1.0, the 2020 campaign. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Rich, always great to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother. You know, today somebody tagged me in a tweet saying, isn't it interesting that this woman that you were shredding on the radio yesterday, the lady from NPR, I forget her name at this moment, but whatever her name
was.
Mayor, yes, Ms. Catherine Mayer, that she's also the chairman of the board of the Signal messaging app. And the only thing I found coincidental about this is that A, she's in the news, and B, what a, I don't have a good word that won't get me in trouble, but what a dry and false-looking person and false-sounding person. She really came across as an empty suit, almost as if she was in your line of work. And I'm not saying you're an empty suit, but I think you get my drift. She just seemed like she didn't care. And she'd been somewhere in Afghanistan 10 years ago pretending to be somebody. So, again, I don't know. I'm going to keep my tinfoil hat right where it belongs, next to my bed. But I want you to take over here and tell me what you think is going on with this whole situation.
So let's go through, you kind of opened the door with Goldberg. First off, he's the guy who helped start the Iraq War back in 2003. He's the guy that reported falsely that Al-Qaeda was hanging out using the gold-plated Saddam Hussein toilets in Iraq. They weren't there, and yet he reported on that and helped justify the war. So, and then also more recently, he's the guy between the suckered and losers lie that President Trump went to Normandy and called, our members of the military suckers and losers, which didn't happen. And so that's him. That's Jeffrey Goldberg. That's Jeff Goldberg in both cases. So as we say in our business, always consider the source. So Mike Waltz has said he doesn't know him. I tend to believe that Mike is telling the truth. I know Mike. We're not friends, but we have texted in the past, so I know him. But I tend to believe Mike Waltz is telling the truth about not knowing. So that means something else happened to get that number included in that small group. And just for your audience to understand, the director of CIA, John Radcliffe, has said those were government instruments they were communicating on with a version of Signal that they approved. So that means it was not an open system. And that means someone had to input those phone numbers into that system. And then someone had to add Goldberg's phone number to that group. These things aren't accidental. Something happened, to your point. Somebody did something to put this whole whatever you want to call it in motion. So this was not an accident. And I think that's what they're trying to get to the bottom of right now. But this call for Pete Hegseth to resign, come on. Are you kidding me?
Sounds outlandish.
We have Hillary Clinton destroying Libya. We have Hillary Clinton running guns out of Benghazi into Turkey for ISIS, and then having the people die. And the 13-day story, the 13-hour story. Nobody got fired over that. Of course, the Afghanistan debacle. Lloyd Austin did not suffer any consequences. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, who may have consequences, which I think he should, Mark Milley, he walked away unscathed. So this is nothing. What happened in this little chat group is nothing compared to the failures of the previous administrations. Just saying.
Tony Shaffer, stick with me. I want to continue to get your thoughts on this, as well as how this develops into the broader geopolitical picture, because I think a lot of this is just a distraction. Folks, keep it locked right here. It's Rich Valdez coming right back with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Don't go anywhere.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mentioned in the hearing, I've never had a personal beef with any of those people. But the fact is that President Trump nominated and put in place the most unqualified cabinet in American history. And it's dangerous for the American people. And it's an insult to the American people and also an insult and not fair to the national security professionals and military professionals who would get court-martialed or possibly go to jail for releasing information, the kind of information that was released in this dangerous and reckless way.
That is Congressman Joaquin Castro from Texas on MSNBC. Again, beating up on Trump, beating up on the cabinet, saying people should go to jail now or that others would go to jail. And it reminded me of a time when somebody took a picture on a submarine. And again, I don't know about you. I've never even been on a submarine, so I can understand a little bit. I think it was excessive, but being on a submarine, taking a picture, I get it. But this is not a picture on a submarine. This was a text message that had some information in it that, as I understand it, is not classified. Our guest, Lt.Col Tony Shaffer, former DIA officer, former Trump 2020 campaign national security advisor and president over at Project Sentinel. Tony Shaffer, your estimation of what Congressman Castro said here, is there any validity in what he's saying?
Let's break it down by the event. First off, it was on a secure internal link. And even if you take Goldberg at his word saying, well, I got it during the time it was being transmitted, there's no chance it could have been transmitted to somewhere it could have stopped the attack, been able to give people the time to respond. There was no specific targets given, no specific locations. So, no, it was not classified. So I am appalled that a congressman would grandstand at this level to actually be, in my judgment. Yeah, well, it's politics, and it's damaging because he's trying to create the perception that somehow, they're not doing a good job and they're incompetent.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is he's playing politics.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And to that point, the actual issue here is something that is irrelevant by the fact that, I don't know if you knew this, Pete Hegseth has something called OADR. That's Original Classification Authority. So basically, legally, there's nothing they can do, even if they wanted to. He can classify or declassify as a Secretary of Defense all the information he wants. So in the end, this, like you said, legally, they're completely on solid ground. This is all politics. And to me, the politics they're playing is very dangerous.
Yeah, folks, we're on with Lt.Col Tony Shaffer, retired from the United States Army. And, Colonel, I want to ask you about a lot of what we're hearing in the news, because it started off with they leaked war crimes or war plans rather, and that quickly became attack plans, which quickly became that's the big nothing burger, and now it seems they're like, well, even though we should still have everybody quitting or they should get fired. I expect that this kind of goes away after today. My thinking is most people are like, all right, that's enough. It's stupid. We don't want that to happen again. But are we really going to start focusing on how this D-bag journalist ends up in there? Yeah, we should. I think that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I agree.
But we also can't, I think, take our eye off the ball. Trump has, I don't know if we're talking about juggling here. Trump's got like 100 balls in the air. So I don't think we could take our eyes off of anything right now, right? You can't afford to drop a ball. He's got so much going on. So what is the next course of action from your best estimation based on your experience?
Well, they're going to continue to prosecute the war. This is all going to be, as you said, set aside. I think it's pretty much done. Nobody's going to go to jail. Pam Bondi said there's not going to be an investigation since classified wasn't. This goes back to the Democrats looking for something else to complain about. That's all it really is going to be. I think the next big focus is going to be the southwest border. One of the things which has been ignored, which I have a mixed feeling about drawing it to your attention, is the fact that the U.S. military is now engaging much more aggressively in military operations against the cartels. This is both supporting Tom Homan. We've got a ship in the Gulf of America prepared to launch off. So you're going to see a lot more military operations against the cartels. I think some of those are going to be pretty hairy, to quote a movie line. And it's going to get, we're going to be down there doing stuff. So the fact is, as has been discussed multiple times by all sorts of folks, that one of the real threats to the United States is the southwest border. The fentanyl is down, which is good. Crossings are down, but it doesn't change the fact that you have, because of the neglect of the last administration, really going back to the 90s, allowed for cartels, which are more powerful than the government of Mexico, to establish themselves as the arbiter of what happens at the border. That can't stay. and this is going to be something that's going to be changed. But again, I see right now with all the protestations of all the illegal immigrants being moved out, you're going to see a focus back on there, because that's going to be the next thing they're going to complain about, I'm sure.
Of course. Now, I want to ask you something that's a little off of that,
Sure.
which is the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky comes out today and he says that Vlad has bombed one of his energy facilities, therefore violating the terms of the deal they agreed to just a few days ago. What do you know about it? What can you tell us?
So this has been tit for tat. The Ukrainians 3 days ago hit one of the gas metering facilities in Russia. So, yeah, both sides are doing it. I'm not pro-Russian. I'm just pro-American, and we got to call both sides out when this happens. Zelensky is still essentially listening to the Europeans. The Europeans are going in a completely different direction than us. Right now, President Trump is trying to get the Ukrainians into a deal where we will be on the ground, not militarily, but commercially. We'll be there as a commercial partner. And if we're there, Rich, you know this, President Trump will protect U.S. people, period, no matter who they are. So you don't need to have NATO there. You just have to have U.S. people working. Zelensky's resisting that. He's trying to go with the French. The French still want to deploy troops. It's insane. So you've got the Europeans, the EU, NATO, the British, all wanting to continue to war. And let me say this for your audience as something, because sometimes the obvious is the best thing to talk about because they don't really see it. If there was ever a time for Russia to invade Europe, it would be now. Right now, Europe has been demilitarized. All their stuff has gone to Ukraine. Right now, Russia has an economy that's on war footing. So, Rich, let me ask you, do you think that Putin's going to wait till the Europeans rebuild their military forces to invade? Because that's what they're saying. We need to build everything up. But someday the Russians are going to invade. No. If the Russians are going to do that, they would do it now.
He's producing more bombs than all of them put together.
Exactly. So does that make sense to you that Putin, who has the advantage right now, would wait 5 years for the Europeans to catch up? It's insane. But that's what the Europeans are trying to say right now.
Right. And I think that's exactly why Trump was being so direct in his commentary to President Zelensky when he said, we're looking at World War III, like yelling at him, kind of supplicating, saying, sir, what's wrong with you? Did you hit your head? And I feel like he just didn't realize that, or he didn't care, one or the other. And it's probably the lack of understanding, I would think, just because he's blinded by his own patriotism, and wanting to defend his homeland. Tony Shaffer, can you give me a couple more minutes of your time? I wanted to get a little update from you on what you think is going on in the Middle East.
Sure, happy to do that.
All right, so stick with us, folks. We're coming right back with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I cannot imagine under any circumstances that any right-minded person would find it acceptable to support or to even acknowledge that there was justification in any way for the massacre of innocent civilians on October the 7th. If I'm confirmed, I will be absolutely clear to carry the president's policies. They have been clear that Hamas will have no future in Gaza. It can't. This was not simply a cold-blooded murder in which people came across the borders and shot innocent people. They massacred them. And they did it in the way that was most physically painful and in the way that was most personally humiliating.
That, of course, is former Governor Mike Huckabee, who's been tapped by President Trump to be the United States ambassador to Israel, giving his thoughts on what is going on. And I got to tell you, this is it's always disheartening, man. I wish this whole thing, I wish all these wars would end, to tell you the truth. But here we are, and such is life, and we've got Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Sir, I want you to weigh in on this because, we were making some progress with a ceasefire, and then, voila, we're back at it again. Your thoughts?
So I said on Newsmax we would never make it to phase 2. There was no way that the Israelis would give up their hard fought gains, and they're not. So we're at the end game, and today we saw protests from the Palestinian people themselves calling for an end to the war because they're fed up with Hamas, and it's taken them long enough, but they're finally there. So I think the combination of the Palestinian people saying enough's enough, the relentless pounding of Hamas's final members in the Gaza, and by the way, I think know this, but I think we, the United States, will support the Israelis by going after Hamas leadership in third countries like Oman, and Qatar. So I think you're going to see that the end of Hamas is very close. We're talking probably weeks, not months, and it's going to be good. And I think it's the Palestinian people are not inherently evil, but they have elements amongst them, which are Hamas and other radical Islamists who have been very much a death cult. and I think they've finally recognized, being part of a death cult, it's probably not a good thing. And I think that they're finally waking up.
Amigos, we're on with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He spent some time at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was President Trump's national security advisor on the 2020 campaign, and he's the president of Project Sentinel. And our discussion is on the future of Hamas. Lieutenant, you say that it doesn't go past the next couple of weeks, which is, I think, encouraging for many people. Now, switching gears to, I guess, a more crystal ball / political question. Do we build the MAGA strip in Gaza? Is that the next step, or is this just fodder for politics?
No, I think this is going to be the predicate for the resumption of the Abraham Accords. You have to have something to do. Well, the Egyptians are involved. You're going to bring in the Saudis. I think finally, and by the way, the only reason that the Abraham Accords started to begin with is that the Trump administration refused to put resolution of the two-state issue ahead of our interests in the Middle East. That's why we finally said, we'll worry about Hamas and all the issues regarding Palestine and Gaza later. We're going to work on the Middle East, and that's why it started. And so now, all these years later, we're going to pick it back up, put it back together, and you're going to have these other nations really do that hard work. Will we be in charge? No, I don't think so. I don't think we should be. But I think you're going to see Arab states come in to work with the Israelis like they've been doing behind the scenes to really find a way to rid the region of radical and political Islam, which is going to be a good thing. And I think this is going to be the beginning of the resumption of the Abraham Accords.
And final question for you. If you were part of the national security team advising the president in one of the advisory roles on geopolitics and intelligence, military activity, what would you say needs to be done that you don't see getting done?
Well, I would be moving at a faster clip to start removing members of the Obama, Clinton, Bush 43, and Biden administrations. I think you've got to do a deeper cleansing of the national security establishment. I'd go through and cut the intelligence community by about 25%, maybe a bit more. And I'd look at the Pentagon the same way. They're already doing some of that, but I think you got to do it faster because the longer people linger from those old regimes, the more damage that could be done in the meantime. So, I know they're moving fast, Rich, but they should move faster.
Understood. Folks, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, retired U.S. Army, president of Project Sentinel. I want to thank you, sir. I always appreciate our conversations and you telling me as much as you're allowed to tell me without having to kill me.
Well, thanks, Rich. I enjoy our conversation. Thanks for having me.
All right, sir. God bless you. And amigos, we continue with your thoughts, your calls, and reactions to everything we're discussing tonight. Straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Voted best head of hair in live late-night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
In terms of the Signals chat controversy that's going on, is DOJ involved at this point? If so, why? If not, why not?
Well, first, it was sensitive information, not classified, and inadvertently released. And what we should be talking about is it was a very successful mission. Our world is now safer because of that mission. We're not going to comment any further on that. If you want to talk about classified information, talk about what was at Hillary Clinton's home that she was trying to bleach bit. Talk about the classified documents in Joe Biden's garage that Hunter Biden had access to. This was not classified information, and we are very pleased with the results of that operation.
That is Attorney General Pam Bondi answering some questions today, making it very, very clear that there is no there in this situation. And I got to say, I get it. I'm not trying to sweep anything under the rug. I understand that a journalist made his way into or was erroneously or intentionally by some sort of malfeasance. I'll take it any way you want to spin it. Made his way into this chat that is secure and government, et cetera, et cetera. Got it. Am I up in arms? No. Am I upset? Yes. Do I think it's a good thing? No. And would I freak out if it were the Obama people? Probably. To be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have the same degree of grace. I'm just being honest. I have a bias towards them because I know that they're not operating in the public good most of the time. And when I've read these things, you know, when you hear what's going on behind the scenes with a lot of the other side, it's always very sinister. When you hear what's going on behind the scenes with these people, it's like, wow, they're working on behalf of this country and they care. How nice. So I have to give them a degree of grace that I wouldn't give the other side. But all that being said, I'll say this. If I ever had the chance to fill in for Caroline Leavitt or Sean Purnell, and they asked me a question in the media and said, what do you have to say about this? I would say, you know what, ladies and gentlemen of the media, you guys were represented in some of the most sensitive moments of U.S. military decision-making that our country's ever seen. You had a front row seat. You were in on the conversation. Talk about transparency and openness. You got it. Next question, please. And I'd move on. But I want to get your thoughts. Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Go right ahead.
Thank you for calling on me, Rich.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you for calling on me. Yeah. You know, what does it equate to? Does it equate to Abby Gate? What SS did? Does it equate for the debacle of a blowing up of a station wagon with 8 kids and 2 adults coming back from some kind of a soiree down in Afghanistan? Does it equate to that? Does it equate to John Milley calling his counterpart in China?
Oh, Mark Milley, General Milley, yes.
Treasonous.
By the way, if we're going to go to war, I'm going to let you know. Yeah.
He did it on a regular basis.
Unbelievable.
He really needs to be.
Paul, the music means we got to go. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say to you, every day when I do this show, I'm staring at a 30-year coin, a gift that you gave me, and I just want you to know it's right in front of me every single day. So thank you for your gift of unity and service and recovery. Really, it means a lot to me, and I love the Serenity Prayer on it. God bless you, my brother. And amigos, we continue straight ahead. If not, hasta la próxima. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this evening, keeping you company till, let's see, midnight, 1 a.m. Here's the phone number. I forgot the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez, and I'm hoping that you'll join us on our late-night national town hall conversation. Now, and by the way, we call that open phones across America. It's a big tradition here on this program, and I'm hoping that if you've never been a part of it, you'll join it today. I want to start with a couple of things. The president, in an effort to protect his majority in Congress, has pulled the nomination of Elise Stefanik to be a United States ambassador to the United Nations. Listen to this.
Today, President Trump making a surprise announcement that he's pulling Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's nomination to be his ambassador to the United Nations. In a post on Truth Social, President Trump defended his decision to pull the nomination, writing, quote, "With a very tight majority, I don't want to take a chance on anyone else running for Elise's seat." He went on to say, therefore, Elise will stay in Congress, rejoin the House leadership team, and continue to fight for our amazing American people.
And then we have a little bit of fallout in something our producers are calling Collins versus Collins. You've got the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Doug Collins, versus CNN's Caitlin Collins, talking about this Signal app fiasco. That isn't much of a fiasco, but they're trying to make it the scandal of the century. I think they're calling it Signalgate. Listen to this.
Do you believe that a mistake was made here, though, to have this conversation, to add a reporter, and to have it on an unsupported, classified group setting?
Caitlin, as I've just told you, I've just answered the question. I wasn't part of it, and I'm not going to speculate more than what the president's already talked about, and those who've been involved have talked about. But we'd love to talk about the veterans.
Yeah, and I do have questions about the veterans, but given what we saw with the group chat and how this was used, you are a member of the cabinet. You obviously know these other members, several of them who were in there. Is this typical for the cabinet to have conversations over Signal? Is this something that you use?
Well, Caitlin, since you undoubtedly do not want to talk about the VA, I have a question as VA Secretary. As cabinet, I want to ask you, because I've been curious about this, because my job is to take care of veterans, and I would like to know why CNN is hostile to veterans, especially one in Florida, where you just had a $5 million defamation suit taking offense at a veteran who was trying to help people. In fact, one of your employees actually said, we're going to nail him. I have a question for you, Caitlin. Is that employee still employed? Are you really concerned about veterans? So if we don't want to talk about veterans now, you want to talk about everything else, I'd like to hear from CNN as the veteran cabinet secretary why CNN seems to have a problem with veterans.
Well, Mr. Secretary, respectfully, my question was about whether or not you as a member of the cabinet use this. And respectfully, I'm conducting the investigation. And I do have a lot of questions for you on Veterans Affairs, but I don't think it would be unwarranted to ask
What you want to do is talk about a subject that I've already answered. And if you want to continue this like this, that's fine. But there are VA employees who are working very hard. There are veterans who get their care from the VA and they get their benefits from the VA. And it does me no good to speculate on something that I've already asked and answered. So I've asked and answered your question. Why don't you answer mine? Are you still, is this person still employed who said they were going to nail one of my veterans, who you had to do a $5 million award from a jury because of defamation, and then you settled the case? Answer my question.
Respectfully, sir, I'm asking the questions here.
It doesn't seem like that, Ms. Collins. This is great. I'm glad that we have people, A, that are fighters, that B, that have the balls, and C, that are former members of Congress. And he's a good lawyer. He did a great job during Trump's initial impeachment. He was one of the impeachment lawyers for Trump. And I thought he did a great job there. So I want to congratulate the secretary, obviously, and really look at this, right? I mean, I think he's not wrong in what he said or asked. Why is CNN being hostile towards veterans? I think the answer to that is the same reason you never hear me play a clip, and trust me, I am happy to play it, of AOC saying, the reason I love this country, of Bernie Sanders saying, well, you know, the reason America is such a great nation, right? Or even Jasmine Crockett talking about how great America is because they don't say these things. They don't like America. They don't like the military. They don't like our founding. They don't like a whole lot of things. Obviously, they don't like you and me. So good for Secretary Collins for calling them out on their BS, because they try to do, a little bit of a snow job on people to make it seem like they're just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. But when you invite the Secretary of Veterans Affairs on and you say, so by the way, you guys using Signal, what do you think about what's going on with your buddy Hegseth? It's a little bit of a sneak attack, right? And quite frankly, it's stupid. It really, in my opinion, is very stupid. You're not going to get something good out of him. However, she was probably trying to have a little bit of a gotcha moment to make it look like, well, we had a cabinet member on and mum was the word. He wouldn't say a thing. But it backfired. And he was prepared for it. And I'm glad we have a former politician from Congress in a job like that, because you need to be to tussle with these people. Unbelievable. Anyway, we've got more. We've got the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, a friend of this program, who is at a press conference in Manassas, Virginia today on the capture of an MS-13 leader.
This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. And we're going to continue to let good cops be cops across this country. President Trump gave us the executive decision to go after and safeguard our communities. General Bondi is our warrior of justice leading that charge. Governor Youngkin, it's an honor to be a partner in this operation with you and U.S. Attorney Siebert. This is the mandate we have. Right now we have an American dying every 7 minutes from a drug overdose. That is a national security crisis we have not seen ever before. We have a woman or child being raped every 6.5 minutes in this country. We have a homicide twice an hour. No part of that metric is a safe and secure America. But thanks to the brave leadership of this administration and the folks that you see here, we are returning our communities to safety. As you heard, we took down this morning a top leader of MS-13. That is not done easily. That is done with brilliant law enforcement.
Kudos to Kash Patel, the FBI, Dan Bongino, President Trump, everybody that's out there, Kristi Noem, that are focused on the national security, the homeland security of our country, our border. Somebody's got to do it. Really, somebody's got to do it. And I have not become accustomed to it, but I have become accustomed to talking about how badly it was done, if it was done at all, in the previous administration. But when you hear numbers like that, every 6.5 minutes, a woman or child is getting raped in America. This is a horrible figure. Every 30 minutes, there's a homicide. Someone's losing their life at the hands of another person. I mean, this is unthinkable. All because of this reckless approach to having cheap labor, this reckless approach to having a voting base, a permanent, I'm going to use the word lower class, which is a Marxist idea, not my own words. Disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting that the left would perpetuate such a thing, but they do. And they do it with impunity, seemingly. And I'm not here for blood. You guys know me. I'm not here for blood. I'm here to plug up the holes. Make sure the ship doesn't sink. Once we have the ship back on its track, which Kash just mentioned, he said, we got to bring our country back to a position of safety. Yeah, we do. And then you go after the people you can. And they do. And they went after some MS-13 bad guys. That's what they were talking about. And I'm so glad they got one of the top leaders who was apprehended in Virginia. We got a clip from Governor Glenn Youngkin talking about that today. We also have a clip of Attorney General Pam Bondi discussing same. And I got to tell you, I'm happy that it's happening. I can't wait for more of it to happen. They need to make a bigger deal of it. People need to know this type of thing can't happen anymore. There's a new sheriff in town. Folks, keep it locked right here. We're going to talk with former Border Chief Randy Clark straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We have been out since about 4:30 this morning. The great men and women of law enforcement have been working on this operation for days and days and probably weeks. Early this morning, one of the top leaders of MS-13 was apprehended. He was the leader for the East Coast, one of the top 3 in the entire country. Right here in Virginia, living half an hour outside of Washington, D.C. He is an illegal alien from El Salvador, and he will not be living in our country much longer. He's in custody this morning. One of the top leaders right here near our nation's capital.
That is Attorney General Pam Bondi at a press conference in Manassas, Virginia today, joined by Governor Youngkin and FBI Director Kash Patel to make this announcement of the apprehension of a top MS-13 leader, Mara Salvatrucha 13, MS-13 vicious gang, only to be replaced by the Venezuelan terrorists of late, the Tren de Aragua. That seemed to be just as bad, if not worse. And I'm glad this is going on. I'm glad it's happening. We need more of this. We need a lot more of it. And I want to get some reaction to this and what's going on overall with the state of our southern border from our guest. Randy Clark is retired border chief in charge of the stations in the Del Rio, Texas sector. He's also the Breitbart News Texas border reporter, and he's with us right now. Chief Clark, welcome back.
Hey, great to be with you, Rich.
Thank you, sir. And when you hear Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi making this announcement, is it? I think it's not a surprise, but it seems like welcome news to me. Your thoughts?
It's absolutely welcome news, and what I'm seeing from my experience is a level of cooperation amongst law enforcement, both state, federal, and in some cases local, but amongst the federals. If you look and you see what DEA and HSI and FBI and ATF are all doing together, that's a level of cooperation that is very, very rare. You'll see that in previous administrations when it comes to, trying to go after a Unabomber. These folks have now decided to incorporate cooperation into day-to-day operations because they are doing this from New York all the way to California, Washington State all the way down to Florida. I have never seen that before. That's quite honest. It was a goal after 9/11 to get these agencies to communicate, to share intelligence with the leadership that President Trump has put into place. He's gotten these leaders to act in unison nationwide, and it's pretty phenomenal. From a law enforcement perspective, it's phenomenal. I wish the citizenry could grasp exactly what that looks like from a perspective of an insider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Chief, this is not the only arrest that we've seen coming out of this area. And I think what you're highlighting here is probably, and you're not the first person to mention it. I've heard a few insiders, who have a lot of experience with this say they've never seen this level of cooperation amongst government agencies and law enforcement. And I think this is a good thing, right? This is exactly how to get a heavy lift going, you need everybody putting their back into it at the same time. And it seems like we're getting that heavy lift, and I love that. But there was a big arrest of 14 Tren de Aragua terrorists busted in D.C., right in the metro area as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's correct. That was these operations are popping up by surprise. We certainly didn't get leaks in the latest ones that we've seen, which is a good thing. I think the word has gotten out, hey, listen, because this is going to get more and more dangerous, especially like with the Mara Salvatruchas and these folks. I wouldn't even call them, gentlemen with Tren de Aragua. They know where they're going now, right? They have seen the Secot facility in El Salvador.
Oh, yeah, they're going with Bukele.
Right? Yeah, you're going to fight tooth and nail. So there's an element of extreme danger for these folks, these federal agents that are out there, making these arrests, because these folks know where they may be going. And it's not a good place, but it's a place that keeps everybody else safe from them. So this latest one in the D.C. metro area was 15 gang members. One was an MS-13, and the rest were Tren de Aragua. But, they're finding them armed. These folks are running around as if it's Venezuela, if it's Peru, it's Ecuador. They're running around as if they're very, very comfortable operating in some of our Democratic-run cities. And that's the difference, is that they're running around where they have a security blanket, and that security blanket is those sanctuary cities which will let them go, knowing that they have no legal reason to be in the United States. They'll shield them from any serious consequences of removal.
Well, and this is, I think, what they've always operated with. And I got to be honest, I want to highlight this, and you tell me where I'm off, but this has always been my speculation that the reason that these, I'm going to call them terrorist groups, because I really believe that's what they are, they've been able to operate in the United States as the foot soldiers for cartels or for whomever they work to promote human trafficking, drugs, etc., with some sort of cooperation from our government. Because without the government either A, turning a blind eye, or B, being asleep at the wheel, or C, just simply allowing it like we saw in the last 4 years, they would not exist. And that we're seeing that now, right? It's very difficult to exist when you have the type of consequences that Trump is putting into play here and putting a team that actually does it and gets it done. So what's your thought on that?
I'm perplexed by the rationale behind these sanctuary cities and what they do. We hear, law enforcement officers, sheriffs and police chiefs say, well, if we're not a sanctuary city, migrant victims won't feel safe to come in and testify, right? And it'll create a more unsafe environment. But imagine if you're a person who's a migrant living in a community, if you're the victim of Tren de Aragua, are you going to go testify against them, especially if you realize that they're just going to get let go? So everybody gets terrorized. And you're absolutely right using those words, because they are extremely vicious, and they work with a level of violence that we've seen organic domestic gangs in the United States not operate with.
Yeah, I agree. Amigos, we are on the phone with retired Border Patrol Division Chief for Law Enforcement Operations, Randy Clark. He was in charge of directing the operations for 9 Border Patrol stations within the Del Rio sector in Texas. He's the Breitbart News Texas reporter, and he's keeping us up to speed on what's going on. And I want to talk about the federal agents that just busted this Texas-based narcotics trafficking ring. That happened as well. And we're going to get an update from Chief Clark on that straight ahead. We're coming right back after this pause. And I want to remind you that if you miss any part of the interview with Chief Randy Clark or anybody else, you can always get it online and share it with somebody, because this is information that people need to hear from the people that know exactly what's going on. Not me, him. So make sure you check us out, richvaldez.com. You can go there right after the show, send a link to your friend. You could text it to them. You could subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review. You could do all that stuff. Anyway, coming right back with Randy Clark and me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And I want you to listen to this. This is a tweet from FBI Director Kash Patel just last night. Breaking. Tonight I can report yet another successful operation from our brave field agents and regional partners in our ongoing mission to break the drug cartels. Earlier today, our teams executed a takedown and arrested 22 members of a narcotics trafficking ring in Lubbock, Texas. And this story is reported in Breitbart News. Randy Clark has the story. And Chief, bring us up to speed. What happened here?
Well, after their designation as foreign terrorist organizations, some of these cartels, they're still flooding us with fentanyl, with cocaine, with methamphetamine. And in March, the president announced Operation Takeback, which was basically getting the southern border under control and bringing every federal agency together to attack these cartels. So I think that's what we're seeing now. And Lubbock it's a fairly large city in the Texas Panhandle, but that tells you that these cartels are operating everywhere, because you can see these operations unfolding, and the coordination with which they're conducted is just amazing. If I was a part of the criminal element right now, I would not be sleeping peacefully, because we're seeing these operations like this one that took out 22 suspected members of a trafficking ring working in West Texas. Those folks, they're going to go now into a prosecution phase, and one of them is suspected of working with the cartels. Maybe more will be found to have been coordinating with the cartels, and now it's going to be the time for the prosecutors to use that designation as an FTO, a foreign terrorist organization, to say, okay, you're providing material support. That is an offense that can carry anywhere from 5 to life, depending on the consequences of, if there were any deaths involved. So that's serious federal charges these folks can face. I think we're going to be seeing that coming up soon.
Wow. This is a pretty big deal, I think, right? I think this change in designation, and I think it's a big deal not because it sounds tough, but because I remember President Trump threatening this back in his first administration, and every time he threatened it, Mexico played ball. Every time he needed something, he would say, I will make you guys an FTO, and I will go ahead and use the military. And now it's happening, and the military is mobilizing there. Talk to us about how I saw a story just last night that Hegseth is moving a bunch more troops to the border. What do you know about that? What can you tell us?
Well, so we know they're going to keep this border fortified so long as the crossings are low. And miraculously right now, there's some days with zero crossing in some of the largest sectors. El Paso sector has had days where nobody's crossing the border illegally. I mean, that's phenomenal considering what we've witnessed over the last administration, when 10,000 were crossing, 11,000 were crossing a day. So that military presence is just going to hold that line so they can keep doing what they're doing in Kentucky and in Lubbock, Texas, and in Houston and in your neck of the woods. If there's a constant inflow, what are you accomplishing, right? It's like trying to bail water out of a house that's flooded while the roof is still damaged. You're just going to get more the next time it rains. So that's a very important thing. But having those assets close to the border, and then also, like you just mentioned, we're working with Mexico to an extent I don't think most folks fully understand because of the intricacies of politics. But we know we're doing surveillance flights with some of the drones that we have in the military. We know we're finding these laboratories. And if you look at what's happening day to day with the narcotics arrests, we are seeing a lot of narcotics being interdicted along the southwest border from California all the way to Brownsville, Texas. And I think that's a little bit of these cartels realizing that we're on the cusp of something happening with this level of cooperation with the United States military training the Mexican military with these surveillance flights. I think they're trying to flush these narcotics out and not sit on them too long in Mexico. So this administration is hitting on their targets to take these cartels down on all cylinders, something we haven't seen in years.
Wow. Now, Chief, I guess last question for you is, there's always talk coming from all over the place, whether it's from the left or others, immigration groups. My least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all out crazy herself, and bringing on immigration lawyers, trying to help people navigate the system and avoid evasion. And I look at things from my perspective, right? And it's a real perspective of ignorance, because I don't know. I've never been a border chief. I've never done federal law enforcement. But I do know that I'm a New Yorker, and I see what happens in the city, and I realize that the Roosevelt Hotel is alive and well. They may have ended the funding stream soon. I think in a couple of days they're supposed to start, taking that apart or whatever, but it's still there. And if the administration was really going after every last person, women, children, everybody else, they'd be there. So I realize that there's going to be some type of pressure that's put to get people to self-deport and that type of thing. Understood. But the left is constantly out there saying, watch out, they're coming after the people working in the kitchens, they're coming here. And the reality is that some of them may be illegal aliens, and some of them may have come into the country the wrong way, and they may end up paying the price. But the administration has harped on, and in my opinion, shown true, that their real interest is in going after terrorists and criminals and child sex abusers and all of these things. Is there a second or third phase where they're going to try and go after everybody to deport every last person that's here illegally, or is that a pie-in-the-sky idea?
Well, so I think, what we have to understand is what you're seeing battle out in the courts, right? Because there are some existing agreements that make removals extremely difficult. Under the previous Trump administration, if you remember, you just mentioned your wonderful congressman's name, Ocasio.
All out crazy.
Remember, she went to Texas and was out there crying, facing a vacant parking lot. So one of the things that is very difficult is there's court cases like Flores Reno that says you can't detain a child more than 20 days for purposes of removal, even if they are with their families, right? So it's very hard to conduct removal hearings in the normal span of time within 20 days. It's impossible, right? So some of these hurdles were going to be overcome by introducing the Enemy Alien Act. That was going to allow them just to speed that up and conduct the removals right away. And so that's playing out in the courts. So I think you're going to see a point that we're going to get there. Right now you're seeing mostly criminal illegal aliens. You're seeing a lot of single adults that are apprehended in proximity of those targets that they got, which are collateral arrest. But I think, I know that they're starting to open the family residential centers in Texas one will hold 2,800 folks, and the other one will hold almost 3,000, I believe. That's in Karnes, Texas, and the other one's in Dilley. They're going to open this machinery back up, and I think that's the goal, to move to that where you say, look, you know what, the only way in is legally. And, if you look at the money we found that has been wasted going abroad to provide benefits all over the world, and Sesame Street in Iraq, a lot of funds that could have gone to poor America, because I think we all realize that the inner city folks in the United States, folks in Native American Indian country in Arizona, the Appalachian Mountains, the South, there's citizens we have that we have just let go by the wayside to focus on folks from afar instead of here. So I think we're going to see that coming for that purpose.
All right. Good point. Now, Chief, I asked a lot of questions, but I still had a couple more, but I need you for another segment if you're able to stay. I know you're a busy guy. Are you able to give us a few more minutes?
Absolutely, Rich.
Perfect. So stick with us, folks. We return with retired Division Border Chief Randy Clark.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Homeland Security released this video Friday night.
Federal agents spotted entering homes in East Boston.
You've seen in Boston, the mayor of that city has said, we're not going to cooperate with mass deportations.
All of these mayors are making these crazy statements about what the administration is doing.
At one point, directly calling out Mayor Michelle Wu, asking, quote, does Boston's mayor think illegal aliens are above the law? Americans don't want a lawless nation.
This narrative that cities where more immigrants live are less safe is just simply not true.
We spoke with the mayor Sunday for the first time since that video was released.
Our city is the safest major city in the country because we are safe for everyone, and also because we collaborate every day with the federal government.
ICE raids have been spotted in Boston, East Boston, Chelsea, and others over the last month since President Donald Trump took office. Mayor Wu earlier this month testified in front of a congressional committee regarding sanctuary city policies. She doubled down on her support of immigrants in her State of the City address Wednesday.
No one tells Boston how to take care of our own. Not kings, and not presidents who think they are kings.
Wu insisted local and federal authorities are working together to get criminals off the street.
That's Daniel Coates from a news station in Boston. And again, Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, saying all sorts of things. I wanted to leave the best for last because I think this is a trending story. And honestly, she doubles down, right? Doubles down with a smile. I want to bring back our resident expert on this stuff, retired Border Division Chief for Law Enforcement Operations, Randy Clark. He was in charge of 9 different Border Patrol stations in the Del Rio, Texas sector. Chief, when you hear this, we're not going to participate, but we participate, but we're not going to help, but we help every day. What do you make of all this?
I think these folks have just flat out lost their way. And I think something really has to be done. I think it's time for Congress to act and to place some very, very strict conditions upon which these jurisdictions honor these ICE detainers. Because, just in Michelle Wu's area last week, nearly 400 illegal immigrants were arrested by ICE during part of an operation they had. And we know that over 200 of them had serious criminal backgrounds, serious. And that's not just jaywalking or DUIs, which can be serious as well. But these were like child rapes. These were people wanted for murder. These were people who had committed heinous crimes or were wanted for heinous crimes. And somehow or another, these liberal mayors, liberal police chiefs, liberal sheriffs, they feel that they're doing something good by making sure these folks don't face the consequences of being here illegally, and that just affords them the opportunity to increase the number of victims, that they have and that they leave behind. I just don't get it. I'm perplexed by the fact that this mayor can say what she's saying and sleep at night knowing that, hey, and maybe it's because she lives in a guarded community and she doesn't have to worry about these folks breaking into her house or harming her child. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's interesting because, again, the mayor defies ICE. ICE is out there arresting, like you said, hundreds of people. And before that, a couple of months ago, the one with Dr. Phil, that also happened in Boston, where Dr. Phil was there, and he came on to talk about that. And these people were all child sex assault type of people. And I just can't imagine how any mayor gets reelected when they're supporting that level of criminal.
Well, and I don't know how they're not held accountable because, part of my duties years and years ago was to do jail checks, much like ICE does now in California. And so when you issue that detainer, this person is an illegal alien, right? In most cases, almost 99% of the time, who this person is. ICE knew who these people were when they were in the custody of Boston authorities. So when they put that detainer, it says notify us, when you're going to release this person. There are statutes on the book right now for aiding and abetting, and I think we need to strengthen those. That's what I mean about Congress needs to act and put these people on notice that, hey, if you want to shield these criminals, then you will be a criminal yourself, regardless of whether you're a mayor, regardless of whether you are a police chief in a sanctuary city. If you release these criminals and endanger your community, you're aiding and abetting. It'd be quite simple.
Chief, excellent insight. I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Tell everybody how they can, catch up with all of the articles that you're putting out and all the work you're doing.
They can find me at Breitbart.com under the Cartel Chronicles page on the main page. They can also follow me on X at Randy Clark BBTX.
Folks, give him a follow, Randy Clark BBTX. He is terrific. I'm hoping to have him back really soon. Chief, Godspeed to you. I really appreciate it, sir.
Hey, God bless, Rich. Thank you.
God bless you, too. And, amigos, we continue straight ahead. Your thoughts, calls, and reactions to all of this. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
To the phones we go. Open phones across America. Let's go to Ralph, Burlington, Vermont, WVMT. Ralph, go right ahead, sir.
Well, I just wanted to share that Vermont is getting a wake-up call because the progressives and the Democrats no longer have a super majority. And having Republican Governor Bill Scott kind of balances the field a bit. Yet Bernie Sanders having his oligarch tour with AOC kind of makes me embarrassed for Vermont, under a social light. But the last thing, instead of following California's lead in mandates, which will destroy our economy via Clean New Deal initiatives, low emission standards, in a timeline that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, really well put, Ralph. I think you're spot on there. And I think it's funny you said it makes me embarrassed. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are embarrassed. I'm equally as embarrassed, right? I live in Jersey now. Thankfully, I live on the other side of the Hudson River. But we're not better on this side, right? We've got Phil Murphy as our governor over here. But I get what you're saying. And you're right. And it's high time that people stop feeling bad about embracing good ideas like Doge, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. That is a good idea. An idea that we need to continue to pursue. Ralph in Burlington, Vermont, thank you for your call. Let's go to David from San Francisco. He's got to be cogent. He's got to be quick because there's minute and a half max on the clock. David, go right ahead, sir.
Oh, you're trying to stifle me, are you? Well, you probably knew a little about the Bible. You remember who Esau was?
Yes.
Where he gave up his
Jacob's
birthright
brother.
He gave up his birthright for a bowl of beans. Well, now, the way you talk about giving up on American government makes you sound like you're willing to give up on America for a handful of Bitcoin.
No.
Now, the idea that Thomas Paine starts out his famous book, Common Sense, by saying that society has basic agreements and they get along in harmony, but every once in a while they come up with a function, like a fresh water system or a sewer system. Or
well, let me ask you this, David, because we're down to 48 seconds. So where is our basic agreement where we have basic agreement and then every now and again we have a disagreement? Where would you say you and I have common ground?
Well, do you want fresh water coming out of your tap?
How about, do you love America? Do you love the founding of this country?
Coming out of your tap?
Do you respect the office of President Trump? Do you think America should continue to exist?
Or do you want sewage put away safely?
So you want to talk about the environment, and I'm talking about the fundamental principles of this country, and like the coward you are, you refuse to answer. That's what I mean by the left hates America. Folks, the music means I got to go. David, thanks for hating America. We'll be right back. Hasta la próxima. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's the Thursday night edition of the program. We are live, we're national. It's about 7 minutes past 11 p.m. New York time, East Coast time, DC time, and I am happy to be here with you. And I want to invite you to join the conversation. If you disagree, you get moved to the front of the line. If you are a regular, I'm happy to hear from you. And if you've never called the show, today's a great day to start. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And we had a great conversation a little while ago with Chief Randy Clark about the arrest of some criminals, MS-13 criminals that were caught in Virginia. Governor Glenn Youngkin helping the federal government, working in concert with them to make this happen. Check this out.
But most importantly, it's this effort that has been enabled by the Trump administration. President Trump said, get the bad guys. I've been working on this literally for the first 3 years of our administration with little to no help from the senior leadership in the federal government and the Biden administration. On day one, we went to work signing a 287G memorandum. It took us 20 hours to get it done. I was able to deputize our state police and our Department of Correction members to go to work in this task force.
That again, Governor Glenn Youngkin talking about the arrest of a top MS-13 leader in Virginia. And this is good news, right? I think it's definitely good news. The fact that we're not having the other 49 governors joining him saying, hey, we're doing the same thing is really the part of the news I think we should be focused on. Why aren't the rest of them doing it? Why do we have so many sanctuary cities? Why do so many people support this idea? And I get it. You know, I really do. I do try to, I'm not saying I agree, but I understand how people fall victim to things. And not to go into a very deep rabbit hole, but I will. If you wonder why people sympathize with communism, oftentimes it's because I think some people are more emotionally based in their thinking, and some people are more logical in their approach to thinking. And maybe this is wrong of me. But when you hear something like what they've told people in Cuba for a long time, or even the people from, you know, where my parents were born in Puerto Rico, that the United States is imperialist. The United States is a colonizer. We don't have because of them. This idea is something that you may believe if you are under the rule of someone who limits the information you have, right? So that's why it worked so well in Cuba. Doesn't work as well in Puerto Rico. But it still works, right? You've got a contingent of people. It works here. Look, at Vermont, you got guys like Bernie Sanders. You got people like AOC. You've got all sorts of people that sympathize with the communist movement in our country. And they're not all Hispanic, right? And Bernie Sanders definitely is not. Bill de Blasio certainly was not. But the point I'm making is it's because it's an emotional plea. It's this plea about, you know, workers of the world unite, like Evita would say. It's this idea that we are being oppressed by the man, by the rich man, the business owner, the this, that, and the third, right? They come up with anything they can, say, and it's us joining together to support our government that's going to set us free. It's always that us versus them. Whereas the American idea is really the idea of us being us as individuals having liberty. And I can't think of a more refreshing idea than that one. But that's the one that we have. But every now and again, you get a bunch of bad guys. And I'm going to call them bad guys, not because I disagree with them, but because they're coming to our country to disrupt. Now, I'm not talking about MS-13 solely or Tren de Aragua solely. I'm not talking about illegal immigrant terrorists. I'm talking about people that come to this country with a student visa. People that come here saying, look, I'm here to just be educated in your fine country. Oh, and by the way, I don't think it's a fine country. I think you guys are this, that, and the third, right? And again, they're entitled to their disagreement, but they're not entitled to come here to make problems. You're entitled to your freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. If you can't say fire because it might cause a stampede, do you think you're really allowed to go and take over a college campus and hold Jews hostage or a janitor hostage and hit the Jews in the face and lock them into a library like has happened at so many of these pro-Hamas rallies? Of course not. Well, that's why Secretary of State Marco Rubio today says that the United States has revoked the visas of at least 300 foreign students. Listen to this.
Maybe more. It might be more than 300 at this point. We do it every day. Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa.
You're saying it could be more than 300
sure,
visas?
I hope. At some point, I hope we run out because we've gotten rid of all of them. But we're looking every day.
These are the type of fighters that you need, people that are willing to get the work done. Now, some people are saying, oh, they're just Trump sycophants. No. What they are people that love this country. And they're willing to fight to preserve a way of life that's safe, that obeys and follows the rule of law. And it's that simple. So kudos to Secretary Rubio. And the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he's responding to President Trump's new tariffs on auto imports. And he's saying that we're going to have our own retaliatory trade actions. And I don't want to be your friend anymore. Listen to this.
Our biggest challenge as a country is becoming the most urgent. Over the coming weeks, months, and years, we must fundamentally reimagine our economy. We will need to ensure that Canada can succeed in a drastically different world. The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear.
Well, Trump is talking about cars. You're talking about ending a military relationship when you don't even have a military. So it sounds like you're signaling like you would like to partner with another country, Russia, China. Who are you going to partner with, sir? Well, I get the bluff, right? You're saying, well, if you're not going to play ball with us and let us tariff the crap out of you, and if you're going to charge us these tariffs to go back and forth with trade, then maybe we won't let you protect us. Maybe we'll let someone else protect us. Sir, you sound like a girly man, as Arnold Schwarzenegger would say, a girly man. And it makes me wonder, is it just Canada that has a crisis with masculinity, or is it everyone? And that's something I want to get into, because it seems like, apart from the massive push towards the LGBTQ agenda, which in my opinion was a Marxist ploy for more division, more divide and conquer, more us versus them. But I think in general, there really is a new definition of masculinity that's going on. Some would, for years you've heard the term toxic masculinity. And, some would quickly knee-jerk argue, well, it's not toxic to be masculine. I don't think that's always the argument they're making. But I would agree with that. It's not toxic to be masculine. I think it's good if that's what you do. It might be toxic if women are being masculine. That, I would say, is probably relatively toxic. But in reality, people should be who they are. And you shouldn't be ashamed or shy away from being masculine. I think it's part of being a man. So I want to have a discussion on masculinity and the different challenges we face as a society when we return, as well as your thoughts and your calls and your reactions coming up right after that. Open phones across America, a time-honored tradition here on our program. And you know the number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And we're discussing masculinity. I want to talk about this because, it's one of those things that we talk about, we forget about, we come back to, but it seems to be an ongoing thing. You remember a couple of months back, there was this big article on dating, and it was a bunch of liberal women that were interviewed in a survey, and the majority of them said that they preferred a guy that was more masculine. Ended up becoming the bottom line of that survey was they honestly didn't like their politics, but they preferred a guy that was more conservative too, and mainly because of the masculinity factor. So is there a crisis of masculinity in our country? I'm going to ask our guest. Our guest is Laurence Anthony. He's a coach and a commentator on modern masculinity, and he's with us now. Laurence Anthony, welcome, sir.
It is such a pleasure. How are you, Rick?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So let's jump into this, because I think there's always talk about this stuff, and there's a million different views on it. But in your travels and your thoughts, what's your take on the current status of masculinity in America?
It's such a phenomenal question, and I'm glad you asked that. And I think the best way to look at this is that we have somewhat of a civil war between what we think masculinity is, what it has been, and a fight for what we want it to be.
Yeah. I don't want the audience to miss any part of this, but it sounds like you're underwater in a fish tank, so maybe we can get you on a more solid line.
Rich?
Yeah, there we go. That sounds a little better. So talk about how we want to, and I agree with you. I think the battle here is a battle over the definition of this, right? What is masculinity? Yep. And I think it's a battle for the definition, too. Some have been trying to redefine it with the term toxic masculinity taking center stage for, I'd say, the better part of the last half decade. So weigh in on this. Tell us what's going on.
I think you hit it right on the head. And so if you think about what we've defined manhood and masculinity as for the better part of the last, forget the decade, I'm going to say for the last century of what we've defined men to be and what we've asked men to be. And what's happening now is a shift. And like there's always been a pendulum shift in every particular area. I consider this, without hyperbole, I consider this to be perhaps the most important topic that is facing us today, because we have a shift where folks are saying, we have men who have been tough. We've asked our men to be protectors. We've asked our men to be providers. We've asked our men to go to war, to do all of these things. Okay, so what does that require? That requires a lot of strength. That certainly requires bravery. We look at our armed forces. It requires a number of different elements that we ask our men to be. And then we penalize some of these traits. So if you think about athletes, right? If you think about athletes, right? You think about, we want our athletes, whatever teams you support, right? We want our athletes to go onto the court or go onto the field, go onto the pitch, and to dominate. We want them to actually win in that battle. And then we expect, when they're off the field, for that shift to happen relatively quickly, for them to stop being the alpha men that we ask them to be. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we face. And, I know we'll get into this a little bit more.
Sure.
But I think one of the biggest issues we have is that men are feeling confused. What kind of man do you want me to be? One. And then two, how can I show up the way that I want to, yet also not be penalized?
You know what? You're hitting the nail on the head. I'm going to tell you a little story. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but it comes right back to what we're talking about. So I know recently, I know of a dear family friend that single mom, and I went to visit the family, and they have a new dog, and the dog is also a female, and I remember going to say hello to the dog, a little poodle, and she says to me, "You got to be real soft around the dog." And I said, okay. And she's like, she's not accustomed to men. She's a little skittish of men. And I thought to myself, all right, well, okay. But I forgot that she told me that. So I went again, and her mom was babysitting the dog. And I saw the dog, and I went to pet the dog, and I'm making dog baby sounds. I'm like, "Hey, little doggy, how are you?" And the dog, I went to pet it. The dog jumped back in fear and peed on the floor. And I was like, wow. It struck me that this dog is not being socialized around men at all. And listen to me, I have a pretty mid-range voice. I don't have a real deep voice like you do. You've got the Barry White going on. And I'm thinking, you would have killed this dog, right? Just saying hi. So I'm thinking, man, this is even the dog is having a crisis of masculinity because sometimes just there is a lack of it around because of what you're talking about. This definition of men are expected to do this, and this, but at the same time, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, and your voice is pretty good. I'm not going to chastise you. You got more than a mid-range voice. I think you and I could probably go on the road and do a duet here. But I think one of the biggest issues is the old roadmap for manhood doesn't match today's world, right? So from boardrooms to bedrooms, men are saying, where do I fit, right? It's misalignment between some of these outdated expectations and modern realities. We need tough men. And this is going to be somewhat of a, I'll take your analogy here because you were going with the dog and the puppy. I'll stick with animals, right? I think everything we need to know about the world can be found in The Lion King. And if we look at Mufasa and Scar, those are two alpha animals. Those are two alpha lions. And I think one of the biggest things we look at is what kind of man do we want? They both had ideas of what leadership should be. They both had ideas of what strength should be. But somewhere in the middle, you do need strength. You do need a little bit of fear. We want our men to be afraid. If someone's going to break into your house, we want a provider, right? We don't want someone who's going to put the welcome mat on the floor and say, come on in.
Yeah.
But we do also need a little bit more nobility. We do need a little bit more understanding. I think somewhere along the lines, empathy and understanding has gotten a bad rap. And I feel like we can merge the two, but that's not what's happening. There is an either or. You said damned if you do, damned if you don't. You can be a killer on the field. You can be a killer in athleticism, right, in sport, and then you can also be soft-spoken. Muhammad Ali, one of our best examples of that.
Yeah, really good point. And, it reminds me of, it's now a meme, but it was part of a larger interview that Dr. Jordan Peterson did where he talked about this. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, I don't have the clip to play for you. But he makes a very, I'm going to say it's a pretty brilliant statement. He says, men have to have the capacity to be dangerous, but they don't necessarily need to be dangerous. You just have the capacity for it, because if people think that you're not capable of being dangerous, then you're useless. You're not the protector that can provide and protect your family. And it was such a simple thing, but such a profound thing, because you're right in saying that. You have to be all of those things, but you don't have to be, a brute. In effect, is what he's saying. And I think I get what you're saying. You have to have empathy. You have to, you have to do a lot of things, right? And I think most men are trying to do a lot of things, but I think society has put an undue pressure on this role and kind of almost villainized it or demonized it. So, very, very interesting point. Now, we're up against a quick pause, and we're going to come back and continue the conversation. But I want to take a moment to let everybody know who you are. Folks, we're on with Laurence Anthony. He's a coach. He coaches executives. He gives commentary on masculinity and leadership as well. And Laurence, take a second and tell everybody, how they find you, where they go, website, and that stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. So you can find me at www.gofurthercoaching.com. As you so perfectly said, I coach C-suite executives, leaders, all right, alpha men, alpha women. You can find me there. You can find me at Instagram at GoFurtherLawrence as well.
All right. Check him out at Go Further Laurence, and we're going to continue to check him out as we go further in our conversation straight ahead with Laurence Anthony. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company all night long till midnight in some areas, 1 a.m. in other areas, straight across the country. Our phone number, your calls are coming up next, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to continue our conversation with our guest, Laurence Anthony. He's a coach, and he talks about modern masculinity. And I'm enjoying the conversation, Laurence. I think it's a really important topic. I guess my views are more traditional than most, but I agree with you in that things have changed. I don't know if society has changed, or maybe society has changed, so therefore society's view of masculinity has changed. But I think at the end of the day, we still need a man that is masculine and willing to do the job he's asked to do. And the job that he's asked to do, I think, is one that is kind of universal, kind of innate. And what I'll say, I'll preface this so that you can kind of take it and run with it. But if you have a child, it's your job to take care of this child. If you have a family, it's your job to take care of this family. It's not what society expects. It's literally what you have to do. Now, of course, there are folks in the feminist movement and other places that will say, well, women can make as much money as men, in some cases more. We don't need men, this and that. All of that may be true from their purview. But it doesn't change the role that you have for yourself. Even if you're a single man, no kids, no wife, no anything, you see an old lady being robbed, the noble thing to do is to help the old lady, right? To defend her. You were built bigger, you have more musculature. It's expected, at least from me. I would think, what are you big for? You're big for nothing if you're not going to help the old lady. So I think we have to kind of get back to our traditional roots, where I think we've lost some of that. You've got a lot of mental illness that affects this stuff. A lot of the COVID crisis that I think affected how people react to things. So there's a lot of things that are out there, and I'm guessing when you're out here coaching, these Fortune 500 companies and these C-suite level executives, whether it's on leadership or masculinity, where do you weigh in on this, and how do we fix this problem?
Well, Rich, you said so much in there that we could probably spend a whole hour on this. I'm going to work through as much as I can here, because I think one of the things that you said there is, if we look at feminism, we look at a number of different aspects here. I try and really share we need to move away from this notion of a gender war, right? Because I think it's really a crisis of disconnection, right? And I think a lot of folks are trying to pit it as men versus women. It's not. It's all of us versus isolation. And the antidote is empathy, purpose, and structure. And I
just want to follow up on something you're saying here, because I think that you might be onto something here. It's probably why you're the coach on this. The isolation is not necessarily us isolating ourselves like one would think, although yes, but also isolating ourselves in our gender, right? So that because we're isolated, we're not able to act out in our gender or in our role. So men are not as masculine because they're not connecting like they used to. Am I getting it right?
Brother, you nailed it right on the head. And if we think back, I'm glad you said that, because you're teeing this up perfectly. If you think back to what happened 5 years ago, COVID, right? So COVID happened, and during that time, we have a Me Too movement. Many men froze, right? So a lot of men were afraid.
The whole world froze.
The whole world certainly froze. But I'll tell you why I think men didn't get the attention is because during COVID, during that isolation, a lot of men were starting to look around and say, wait, what are these relationships I have with my friends? Some of them are just really superficial. I really don't have deep relationships. The reason I called my company Go Further is because we need to go deeper in order to move ahead. And I think a lot of men realize I feel isolated here. I feel like I can't even connect with my feelings, or I can't connect with other men. And if I do, sometimes it's been superficial. Who's there for me? So then you feel you can't connect with your partner, your woman, and you really do feel isolated. I think the best example that we've seen of someone in art and media of struggling with masculinity has been Tony Soprano, right? I think The Sopranos was ahead of its time for so many reasons. But here you had a man who was walking in two worlds, the traditional world where he had to kind of be this mobster and take care of that family. But then he also had to be a family man and a provider there. And this was a man who had deep, complex feelings, right? And we've had to shift to, right? We had to shift to how do we make space for both? We tell women all the time, you're allowed to be this. You're allowed to be so many things. You can be vulnerable. You can be soft. You can be, but we don't tell men that, right? So we don't tell men you can be both the protector and the provider and be strong, have those muscles, be able to step up when you need, but we don't create that space to allow them to be vulnerable. We keep seeing vulnerability as a weakness, and I think that's one of the biggest failures. Strong men feel. My grandfather, who's going to be 92 this year, is one of the strongest men I know.
God bless him.
He is. Yeah, thank you. He's strong. He is firm. He's born in 1933. This is like old school man.
Yeah, I know the type.
I imagine we both come from quite similar backgrounds,
Yeah.
but this was a man who felt comfortable to tell me, "I love you, grandson." Who felt comfortable to? I watched the way he interacted with his wife of 58 years. It was with love, and that's why I think when you really talked about men in the household, I thought that was really important because you can be caring at home. I love you said you don't have to be a brute. You can be strong and not be a brute. It's how do you switch between the two, and I think that's one of the things that we don't discuss much, and we don't allow that room for.
Yeah, and that's where I think, some of the other things come into play, right? Not just like environmental and societal things, but really one's upbringing, how you grew up, where you grew up, all of that stuff I think plays a part. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I live in Jersey now, the suburbs of New York. And I'm a pretty, I think, regular guy for this part of the world. This parts of the world I go to, and they're like, wow, this guy's pretty abrupt. And I'm like, man, you should meet my brother because he's off the hook. and I'm thinking, I'm like the most mild-mannered New Yorker out here. So, I get that. I get what you're saying. A lot of it depends on where you are, and some people are a little bit calmer, and some people a little bit more aggressive. But you're right. There needs to be this balance that you strike, and you have to be able to know where and when you turn on what, and that might be where the things are going haywire, and mainly, like you said, because of isolation, and not necessarily the isolation. I think that for me automatically hit me, which is like, oh, this guy's an incel. He doesn't want to go out the house or any of that. But really isolating one's feelings per se, isolating your own worldview. Just saying, hey, look, I have to operate within this framework because that's just what I believe. So I'm isolating myself. Even if you're not isolated per se, you're still isolated, if that made any sense.
No, it made a lot of sense. And I love it because I think when we think of isolation, we do think exactly what you said, right? You get into the incel path. I mean, Adolescence, the number one show on Netflix right now, talks about that, how we're losing boys to the internet and how these incels are created. And I think that's a massive thing. And that's where parents come in. The last line uttered in that show is the father who has lost his son really to the system. The father, the last line is, "I should have done more." And I think the responsibility, you talk about this as a father, as a man, our responsibility is to look out for the household, is to look out for those people around us. Does that mean we don't feel? Well, of course we feel. But I think you hit it right on the head, is that isolation. And you remember that show 24?
Love
Jack
24.
Bauer?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Jack Bauer is as cool as it gets. If we think about Jack Bauer, what are some of the traits that come up when you think about Jack Bauer?
Oh, he was a hero. He was quick on his feet. He was fearless.
He was a man. Jack Bauer was the man.
He was a man's man.
And he was a man's man. I think one of the most important episodes in that show, doesn't get talked about often, is at the end of a season finale of one of the seasons. Jack is in his car after doing what he normally did. He saved us from the terrorists. He did his whole thing. He's in his car. We know Jack as this man's man. He's sitting in his big American SUV, and he starts to break down at the wheel. He starts crying. No one else is in the car with him. He starts crying. It's the first time we've ever seen Jack cry like that. And then his phone buzzes, and they're like, "Hey, Jack, we need you back at headquarters." And he has to gather himself and go back. And I think that is something that we don't talk about enough. We have to be able to support our men when they show up and when they have to be a hero, like you said, but we have to allow them space where we're not just isolated in our feelings. It takes both. And it's because of that empathy that we have that allows us to be great leaders, right, and serve. Because ultimately, to me, leadership and strength is in service. Yes. Can you serve? Do you serve your family? Right? Great leaders serve. They don't dominate.
100%. I agree with that. Folks, we're on with Laurence Anthony. He's a coach and commentator on masculinity and leadership. And Laurence, I think you're blowing it out of the park here. Really, really good stuff. For people that want to, again, keep up to speed with you, follow you on social, check out your work, maybe even hire you to work at their company to do a workshop, how do they find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Go Further Laurence. All right, I'm present there, do a number of things there. You can also find me on our website at www.gofurthercoaching.com. LinkedIn, we interact with a number of different CEOs under Laurence Anthony, and that's what we do. I consider myself to be a servant. I serve my clients, I serve my friends, I serve the people around me, and I think that's how we do it, is top-down leadership. So you can find me on all those channels, and it's been a pleasure.
Likewise, I'm looking forward to our next conversation on one of the topics that you're really well-versed in. It was a really good conversation. Folks, Laurence Anthony, make sure you check him out wherever you can. Follow his work. He's a rock star. Laurence, thanks, brother. God bless you.
You too. Thanks so much, Rich. Take care.
You bet. Amigos, your calls and more are coming up right now. Missouri, Florida, Montana, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, to the phones we go. 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Evergreen, Montana. KOFI in the building. Let's check in with our good friend, regular here, Frank in Evergreen. Go right ahead, sir.
Hi, Rich. Yeah, I want to talk about Montana's prison population. We've got a crisis where they keep building these medium security prisons within the city limits. And then, these are violent, they're still violent people that are between 20 and 40, but they break out and they cause mayhem. But what we need is to move these back out towards airports, back in the area where they have the Forest Service set up, to have like a concentration camp, but it's also a training camp for fighting these forest fires. And we've got a lot of value here as far as people that can do that. They're from California. They can withstand the heat of the Sierra Madres and the Sierra Nevadas, and it's something that would be benefit to the whole continent, and as well as Canada. And Canada doesn't have the manpower to put out their forest fires.
They're not our friends anymore, Frank.
Oh, I know, but they sure want to ruin our timber industry by subsidizing their timber up there to sell it cheaper than we can produce it. And it's just it's an unfair advantage. It's never been friendly. Canada is not friendly.
That's the point. I think that's the point that Trump is making, I should say. And now they're mad that he's making that point. Now, and I like your point. A while back, a friend of ours from the program as well, Curtis Sliwa, who called in, we had a conversation about this, and he was talking about the same thing, about moving people out into the sticks. And he was suggesting the homeless, not necessarily to fight wildfires like you so aptly pointed out, but more so saying, we could actually give them a chance to live out in the country if, instead of building shelters right in the city where they end up back on the street, on the train, doing what they're used to doing, put them a little further out where there isn't anywhere to go but there, to really try to help them, overcome this being accustomed to being in the streets. So I don't know if you tell somebody, hey, look, 3 hots and a cot or a really hot wildfire, which one they opt to do. But it's a good idea nonetheless. Frank in Evergreen, Montana, good to hear your voice, brother. Haven't heard you in a while. Amigos, we come right back with your calls from Florida, Missouri, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
And now, back to your favorite late-night radio talk show. It's Rich Valdez, America at Night.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue with your calls and more. Let us go to Lester, Daytona Beach, Florida, WTNB. Go right ahead, sir.
Hi, Rich. I just heard on the news while listening to your show that there has been more outbreaks of measles in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that?
Yeah, in Texas, I heard that there's an outbreak in Texas. I think it's pretty much contained to Texas as far as what I've seen.
And now there's an outbreak in Georgia.
Ah, so it's spreading. That makes sense. It's probably going to move throughout the
Yes,
South.
that's what they said. They said they don't call it an epidemic now. But I'm thinking, okay, I thought Fauci, that he's in my mind now.
I'm
And
thinking
people-
Biden and his open border.
They can do what?
Well, I'm thinking it was likely the result of Joe Biden and his open border because they were allowing so many people into the country unvetted. And while they insisted that you and me and everybody else have to get a vaccine, they didn't care who was coming through the border with a vaccine or not. And it's quite likely if you're coming from a third world country that doesn't have the same standards on vaccination that we have in the United States, that they may not be vaccinated against measles, which is why we're seeing it happen.
Okay, you got me there. But also, there's places like the CDC that they keep a strain of measles frozen for some reason to play around with in the lab. And I'm not. It sounds like a conspiracy. But you had these people on your show, and they would know if this thing burst out like a whatever you call it, an epidemic.
Yeah,
you
or
could
a
make one
pandemic,
phone
even worse,
call.
right? Right. Now I
Yeah,
see what
and
you're
you could
saying.
make one-
It's a good idea. Maybe we have to invite one of our infectious disease people, like maybe Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He could weigh in on this. Very, very good. Very good point. I didn't know it had spread to Georgia, so thank you for that update, Lester. I appreciate it. Shout out to WTNB, Daytona Beach, Florida. Love that place, by the way. And let's go to our man, Bill. Bill is our resident historian here on the show, calling us from Jefferson City, Missouri, KTTR. Bill, go for it.
Yes, a nice editorial piece in our paper the other night, and it featured Pete Hegseth and the F-47 airplane, which is going to be manufactured in St. Louis. Boeing won the contract, and the great guys that used to be McDonnell Douglas are going to do the work. So we'll be listening in the skies, and it kind of reminds me of the great work that McDonnell Douglas did with a plane, the F-4, that they redesigned for the Vietnam era, called the F-4 Wild Weasel, which was a F-4G with a pilot and an electronics warfare officer in it, which is a great plane during the Vietnam era. So that's it. And
Well, thank you. And you know, I McDonnell Douglas is before my time, but that is Boeing today, and I think that it's pretty cool that we're building everything locally and that we're doing it right in your backyard. All right, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it, brother. God bless you. Godspeed to you. KTTR in the building, Jefferson City, Missouri. And amigos, that's it. The music is playing. It's time for me to go. And here's where I bid you adieu. If you're sticking around, you might just hear some really good conversation that we might be having in a little bit with Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. And if this is the end of the road for you, then I say hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.